Hello, dear listener. This is Brian for Breaking Down Security in the Breaking Down Security World Headquarters. Mr. Betcher and I would like to thank you for listening. And many of our listeners, rabid as they are, wanted to know how they could help the podcast in some way. And we decided that Patreon is probably the best way to do that. The beauty of Patreon is it's not a requirement to give. If you think that we give you a useful commodity, even if it's only CPEs for your certifications, you can give money if you so choose. Podcast will always be free, and whatever monies that we get from our Patreon account will go to advertising and to pay for our LibSyn every month. It's about $22, which I'm paying out of my pocket, along with advertising on Facebook and stuff. We're on our Facebook fan page. I boost the posts on there. So it comes out to be about $100 a month if we do 4 podcasts a month at $20, and then $20 for the LibSyn. So it's about $100 a month. I'm fine with that, but some people have said, hey, I want to be able to support you guys because you're great and you're awesome. And one, it makes me feel uncomfortable when people tell me I'm awesome and great. But I understand that some people like to do that stuff. So if you would like to give to the podcast, you can. If not, that's fine too. There's no pressure. Actually, I'm giving $1 a month, which is kind of redundant. But anyway, so that's something new that the podcast is doing, and I just wanted to let you all know about it. We're going to pimp it out probably the next couple of weeks, just, so people know. I'm going to drop you right back into our podcast interview with Tim Wood, talking about ITIL, starting about slide 25 if you have the presentation from last week. We're going to get into a lot of good stuff. I mean, we're going to be talking about business continuity, disaster recovery. We're going to be talking about problem management and how infosec deals with that. We're also going to be talking about change management, all the various facets of ITIL and how infosec interfaces with that quite seamlessly. So hope you enjoy. Again, comments, questions, and concerns, hit us up on iTunes with feedback, bds.podcast@gmail.com. So that's it, I guess. Don't have anything else to talk about. Me and Mr. Betcher will be back at full power next week with another great podcast. And thanks for listening.
So there's really 3 ways in which information security management and ITIL kind of work together. First of all, information security management is a process within the ITIL framework. And on slide number 25, you'll see that this slide, by the way, shows all of the processes within the ITIL version 3 series of books. And in the service design book, you'll see towards the bottom there, information security management is mentioned. And so
so it's in the design phase. That's interesting, not the operational type phase.
And I'll explain why, Brian. The big mistake that even these days most organizations make is that, once again, talking about change management and project management as well, when an organization builds a solution, it still has a tendency to throw that solution over the fence to operations at the last minute. The ITIL books, as they're written, encourage a different approach, which is when you know that you need to build a new solution and you come to gather the requirements for that solution back in the design phase, don't just gather functional requirements, but also gather information security requirements, capacity requirements, availability requirements, service level requirements, operational support requirements, DR and business continuity requirements, etc., etc. The list goes on. The reason that all of these processes that you see in purple on this slide are in the design phase is because they have to be considered during the initial requirements gathering of a solution. And hopefully you guys agree that if more organizations did that, we would end up with more secure IT environments.
No, I fully agree with that, yeah.
Not only that, but reduce costs. because if you try to implement these things towards the end, shove it to the operational phase, the cost increases, tenfold or exponentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, a lot of what you mentioned there, a lot of compliance frameworks require those things. Having SLA, agreements, on paper, or having them, your BC and your DR plans available. Having that information so that you can create a more effective continuity or disaster recovery plans are very important for a lot of, I know PCI specifically, but you've got SOX, you've got, HIPAA requires contingency plans and DR and BC plans. So, yeah, I can understand completely how that would be, how ITIL can help with that.
Okay. Now that we understand that information security management is one of the processes in ITIL, by the way, that doesn't mean that you only undertake information security related activities in the design phase. Brian, you mentioned, hey, how come it's not in operation? There are obviously information security activities in operation as well. It's just that all of the information related to security management is in the service design book. So I just wanted to articulate that. The international standard for information security is ISO 27001.
Yeah.
The international standard for IT service management is ISO 20K or ISO 20000. And there is no intent in ITIL to duplicate what 27001 has already documented. So on this slide, number 26, what you'll see is that 27001 describes the model for establishing, implementing, operating, monitoring, reviewing, maintaining, and improving your ISMS, your information security management system. What ITIL really concentrates on is the policies, the plan, the organizational structure, the management of risks, and your communication strategy to support that system. So it doesn't seek to duplicate anything that's in 27001, but it seeks to supplement it.
Okay, that leads me to a question here. A lot of people in InfoSec, I don't know, they speak a language that's in the operational phase that could be different than ITIL. Can you give me your definition of an event and your definition of an incident as ITIL states it?
Sure. So event management and incident management in ITIL are defined as different processes. An incident is an example of an incident is, I'm not going to give you the book definition. It's an IT service that you expect to be working perfectly is not working in some way. It could be running slowly. It could be completely unavailable. So let me think about how to articulate this.
I remember one time you said it was like a service interruption or a potential service interruption, right?
It is a service interruption. Let me get my thoughts together so that this sounds good on the recording. So event management is all about monitoring the IT environment so that you can see unpredicted events happening in the IT environment, and you've got a chance to rectify a situation before it causes a service interruption. So an example of that for you guys might be a hacking attempt. If that hacking attempt is successful and the confidentiality or integrity of data is compromised, or if a hacking attempt causes a service to become unavailable, then you've got an incident at that point. And so event management is more proactive.
Preventative. It's a preventative thing.
It is. It seeks to prevent service interruptions by looking for unexpected events in the IT environment. The incident management process is all about, okay, we have a service interruption happening. What do we now need to do to get the service back to working in its normal fashion as quickly as possible?
Okay, so that really does line up with ISO 27001. I found this site, and it's a quote by, and this guy was asked, he's an ISO 27001 certification lead auditor. His name is John Very, and he said, well, he gives a long definition of the difference between them, but he said, stated another way, an incident is an event or series of events that have risen to a level requiring action to prevent them from negatively impacting the organization. So I think that does kind of, your definition of event and incident as they relate does fall in line with ISO 27001, it seems.
I think so.
And and event management can be different things. Like if you know you have a high visibility website and you've heard from various media reports or from, I'm going to use the word threat intelligence feeds, that you're a financial institution and some bad guys are going to go after a financial institution. The event management would be monitoring for increased traffic on the site to make sure that your site doesn't go down. And then once your site goes down, you're going to be doing incident response or incident management because, your event management wasn't necessarily good enough maybe to put controls in place to stop the site from going down.
Or it triggered the incident.
Yeah. Yes. I agree with everything you said there, Brian.
Yes. ITIL certification, please. No, I'm just kidding. All right.
Okay. So, from an ITIL perspective, the information security management system addresses policies, your plan, the organizational structure, risks, and strategy. But ITIL also provides guidance on creating information security sub-processes. And on slide number 27, those sub-processes are the design of your security controls, security testing, the management of security incidents, which we just talked about, and how to undertake a security review. Now, going through each one of those four very quickly, the design of your security controls is all about designing appropriate technical and organizational solutions to ensure, and the ITIL makes this crucial, the confidentiality, integrity, security, and availability of an organization's assets, information data, and services through the establishment of a management framework which will initiate and manage information security in the organization. Security testing is all about undertaking regular tests and ensuring that your procedures, tools, and controls underpin this information security policy. Management of security incidents ensures that you're able to detect and fight attacks and intrusions and minimize the impact of security breaches. And then security review is all about ensuring that measures and procedures remain in line with risk through regular maintenance and testing. So the ITIL information security process will enable an organization to implement procedures that allow all of these things to happen.
So that confidentiality, integrity, and availability, that kind of sounds familiar to me.
That's the CIA triad, dude.
Oh, that's right.
The first thing all CISPs learn. So, yeah.
We know all about that.
Yeah, which is, I mean...
It's interesting that it's called out, in ITIL.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plus, Brian, you've got ITIL Foundation certification, haven't you?
I do.
You would have seen it then as well when you took your exam, right?
Yes.
Okay, so slide 28 talks to the goals and benefits of information security from an ITIL perspective. The goals of the information security management process are to align information security with business security and to ensure that information security is effectively undertaken for all IT services. The benefits are it encourages the creation and operation of a process using a structured approach. It defines your roles and responsibilities, ensures integration between processes, and once operationalized, it ensures the continual improvement of those processes, of that process. And as we mentioned at the head of this presentation, that allows for required updates based on the discovery of new threats.
I like that last part there where you said on there, the design phase of the service lifecycle means that IS requirements can be documented and built into solutions rather than after the fact, which is kind of the holy grail of what we want everything to be like. So why do you believe that there are not a lot of companies implementing ITIL? It seems like this is something that would work for pretty much anybody. If you're in a design firm, or if you're doing not necessarily code audits, if you're a development firm doing applications, or creating software, ITIL would seem to be like something that you should implement, not necessarily just think about implementing or saying it's too hard. This would be something that, like you said, would save you money over time. But if it can help your design phase, and I don't understand why there's such a hesitation by organizations to enable that.
I think it's twofold, Brian. First of all, in the very early days, there were some horror stories of organizations that tried to adopt ITIL but were not successful. Those failed adoptions were mainly based around asset and configuration management. In the ITIL framework, asset and configuration management is a foundational process which underpins and enables every other process in the framework, but is very, very difficult to do.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we've been talking about critical controls, and I don't think we've covered this yet because we're going backwards, and I don't know where we got the idea to go backwards, but those things are like the top level. They're like the most important. So yeah, that falls in line as well.
Yeah. A lot of organizations that tried to adopt ITIL, asset and configuration management, in the early days, they did fail, and it did cost a significant amount of money, and it led to a lot of heartache and some bad press. As a result of that, ITIL really changed its approach to asset and configuration management, and it's now much more pragmatic. At the same time, there are discovery tools available, and there are IT service management integrated tool suites that are available that really support asset and configuration management from both a process and a tool perspective in organizations. It's a lot easier to be successful at implementing asset and configuration management now. And if you are, that enables the rest of the ITIL framework.
So the ITIL horror stories, was that because ITIL wasn't flexible enough until version 3 to be able to be used in any environment, or did they just not understand exactly the whole goal of ITIL and failed in implementing it properly?
I think a lot of it was to do with suboptimal consultants at the time, and a lot of it was to do with the scope of ITIL, which in version 1 was very IT operations centric, and then in version 2 gradually started to grow to embrace the full scope of IT, including best practices about how to really implement the framework successfully. It sidelined application development and information security for the longest time, and those two elements are critical. Once those things were brought into the fold, ITIL really started to take off. What it doesn't do, though, it doesn't really allow for the development of solutions using a project management methodology. So it's still up to organizations to use the project methodology that makes sense to them in terms of implementing and adopting both the processes and the IT services that are created within an organization.
I see certain organizations not following best practices when it comes to I don't know. I'll give you an example. All right. So I'm running scanning, right? And I find that this particular server needs to be patched. So I put in a service request to have that patch implemented. All right. So this service request just sits there. And I'm thinking, okay, is this guy gonna know? I mean, I do I assign it to his boss? What do we do? I mean, and then I start sending him emails. I say like, when can I expect this? Then do you have an update? Do you need some clarification? Do we need to have a conference call? Then I get out of office emails, and then who can I escalate this to? And it's like, man, if I could just spend 2 minutes and do the change myself, I would save myself like 20 minutes because, I have to rely on someone else to do it. And it seems like I'm trying to spend all this time getting them to do their job, right? So, how can ITIL help in that particular situation? Because it would help me greatly in being in security to be able to hand these tasks off to to the guy who has to do the job effectively.
Okay, so that's a great question. Um, the last two consulting jobs that I've done have both involved managing an IT service management program, which consisted of multiple different projects, all of which rolled out an ITIL-based process underpinned by a module of an IT service management tool. In both cases, that tool was Ansible, and I've grown to really love Ansible as a tool because it does exactly what you need it to do, Brian, which is when you document a service request or a change request in the system, you have the ability to, through service request or change modeling on the back end, to define the workflows and the tasks that need to be undertaken in order to complete that work. Every task can have, an operational level agreement, a time-bound element to it. You can watch the progress of those tasks through the entire life cycle from end to end. You always know exactly the stage that the workflow is at, who the owner is, how much time they've got to complete that work, etc., etc. So a modern integrated IT service management tool suite with workflows and tasks built into it based around an industry standard process is exactly what you need and in order to overcome the deficiencies that you see in the organization. That's one example.
So you mentioned this tool. Do I need to get a particular tool that is sort of ITIL certified or has the seal of approval?
Yeah. So there's no such thing as an ITIL certified tool, but they have introduced a term. What is it? I think it's ITIL verified.
Okay.
There are certain tools that
that kind of follow the methodology, right?
Yeah, I can't think of the exact term that's used for those tools. Let me approach this a different way. In order to overcome the sort of issues that you're talking about there, Brian, you really need improvements in the areas of people and process and tools. From a people perspective, you need a cultural change. You want the guy who's been assigned the task to do your work for you to really have a customer focus and good service orientation and want to do the work that he needs to do, in a timely manner. That can be enabled by an industry standard process, and it can also be enabled by an industry standard tool, especially one that includes workflow capabilities.
Now, would it be better to, and I don't know if there is an answer because it might depend on each organization. You'd be best to answer this, I think. Would it be best to assign things to a group's manager and have the manager divvy out the work, or assign it to the individual that you think would be best, or that has more experience?
Yeah, the approach that I've used in the last two organizations I've worked in are that tasks always get assigned to teams. But when a task is assigned to a team, a notification goes to the manager to allow the manager to know that this task belongs to the team so that they've got the option to say, hey, Fred, I need you to pick this up.
But if the manager doesn't divvy that out, take the initiative and do that, then it just sits there, right? Everybody thinks the other guy is going to get it.
And that's why you really need a culture change so that people go in and take responsibility for owning the activities assigned to the team. You know that no one's picked it up because you can look at the workflow in the tool and see that it's sat awaiting assignment. And so you know that no one's picked it up at that point. If you see that, Susan is owning it and they've got 2 days to complete the task, you know that it's now in progress rather than just awaiting assignment. And I'm making up those statuses, to make the point.
Sure.
But it's very easy to see within the tool to get a status update for yourself as the customer.
One of the ways that you mentioned with ITIL would be setting like inter-departmental SLAs, service level treating each department or each division as a service to be given out. You have your people who handle the firewalls; they do a service. You have the people who are managing the code. That's a certain they have a service. So having kind of an interdivisional or interdepartmental SLA saying, okay, I've sent you a ticket, you have to respond to said ticket manager of firewall people in an hour and a half to let us know that you've accepted it and it's going to be moved on, could be something that has to be part of the culture shift.
Yes, sir. And not only that, but the tool can enable that in multiple different ways as well. For example, you can set thresholds in the tool to say, send the manager a notification that nobody's picked up this task at 25% of the agreed SLA. So if you have a departmental SLA, as you mentioned, of 2 hours for someone to take ownership of the task, the manager will get a notification at 30 minutes saying no one's taken ownership. And you can set those thresholds, 25, 50, 75%, and another one when it's breached so that he can, walk down to the team and say, hey guys, what's going on?
Yeah.
The sort of tools that we're talking about they're really fabulous. They enable, so first of all, they automate previously manually administrative tasks, but they also automate notifications to enable work to be done in a timely manner. The trick is to decide what your service level agreements should be up front to make them realistic so that you're not causing people to fail. But also bear in mind that, you've got the whole continual improvement concept. So it's a good approach is to have not very aggressive service levels to start with, and then 3 months after implementation, if you see that you're meeting the service levels 100% of the time, you can start to ratchet them back and make them a little bit more aggressive at that time, get work done quicker.
Yeah, and that kind of lies upon the level of staffing you have. I mean, you might need to extend the SLAs if you don't have a large team, and then vice versa.
Yes, exactly right.
Yep, and SLAs could be its own podcast, having to do with operational and business and everything.
So there are 3 different ways in which ITIL and information security management really overlap, and that ITIL underpins information security management. The first way is directly. Information security management is its own process within the ITIL framework. The other 2 ways are indirect, and if we take a look at slides 29 and 30, we'll see that there are multiple other processes which also support information security through either resolving an incident once it happens, in other words, reactively, or preventing an incident from happening in the first place, in other words, proactively. And that's kind of what we were talking about when we were talking about event management and incident management a little bit earlier on. So moving on to slide 30, the processes that support information security through resolution are the help desk, in some places it's called the service desk, and incident management. and also through IT service continuity, also known as business continuity and disaster recovery. And then on, so let's take a look at each one of those in turn. The service desk, also known as the help desk, through its adherence to best practices and its driving of the incident management process, it ensures minimal downtime when we do have information security related incidents. So if we have a hacking attempt or either attempted or successful, the help desk would be the primary documenter of that information. If it hadn't already been spotted by event management, they would create a ticket and send it through to the team responsible for resolving that situation. Similarly, the incident management process ensures the fastest possible return to service when interruptions do occur, and it does that by concentrating limited IT resources on the highest priority incidents at any given time. And those highest priority incidents should always be information security related. Within the ITIL framework, we have a coding structure that allows for the prioritization of incidents based on a combination of impact and urgency. An organization should always consider information security related incidents to be the highest priority because of the potential damage and impact that they can have to any organization.
Now, how would you prioritize your incidents? I mean, is this where a couple of podcasts ago we talked to Lee Brotherson about threat modeling, and we're trying to peg down like which systems would be the most important, or that kind of thing. For incident management, do we have different levels of incident in this case?
We do. So this is an example of ITIL telling you what to do, but not necessarily how to do it. ITIL says you should prioritize your incidents based on a combination of impact and urgency, but then it allows an organization to define what impact and urgency mean to it. In most organizations that I've worked in, the impact and urgency are the number of affected users and the level of criticality of the affected system or service. So to your point, you would need to assign a criticality level to your systems and services. That's also, by the way, very useful when it comes to building your DR plan, because your most critical services should be the ones that you bring back online first.
Sure.
And you should build your infrastructure around that to enable that to happen. But most organizations say that the level of criticality of the service or system impacted and the number of affected users, combine those two things together, and that will give you an impact priority code of usually 1 through 4 or 1 through 5. And information security should always be priority 1s.
Cool.
Or special.
Yeah, that's right.
Special.
So we talked a little bit about service continuity or business continuity, disaster recovery. This process is all about returning in the fastest possible time services when interruptions occur and you have a disaster situation underway. And I think we covered that in the answer to your question a minute ago there, Brian.
Yeah.
So there are also processes in the ITIL framework that support information security through prevention. So these are the proactive processes, and they include event management, access management, problem management, change management, requirements validation and testing, and configuration management. So let's take a look at those real quick. We talked about this before, event management, slide number 35. Event management is all about monitoring the IT environment. It enables you to predict events, to preempt and prevent IT service interruptions through ensuring effective monitoring of your most business critical services. So we can, for example, spot a hacking attempt or an intrusion and resolve it before any impact to the IT operational environment. So that's event management.
So event management is all about monitoring, right? You monitor these events. You look for certain signatures or certain patterns in these events, and then you raise an incident if those patterns match some sort of like a hacking attempt, for example?
You can. There's one of two things that organizations can do. They can either always raise an incident and have this have the incident assigned to a specialist team to deal with it, or what you can say is you can allow the event management process, or the people that have a role within that process, to, for example, shut down a server that you can see someone attempting to hack. You know, why wait until you've created an incident ticket and you've escalated that to the right team and they've been, you know, they've stood up and been involved. If you can prevent an intrusion by shutting down a piece of infrastructure, and you can do that without impacting any service or any system, then why not give authority to event management to do that? Some organizations do.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I know that for you like event management, if you notice that there's malicious traffic going to a certain server from another IP address or something, you can have IDS or IPS effectively block that IPS or IP address at the firewall.
Yeah.
So that way you don't have to worry about, say, a denial of service attack on that box.
Yeah. So what other processes are proactive in nature? Well, there's access management, of course. So access management ensures that only staff members with a business need to do so have access to systems. That in turn minimizes the risk of deliberate or accidental damage. That's slide 36. On slide 37, problem management. This is a very interesting process within the ITIL framework, because what problem management is responsible for is provisioning known error and workaround information. So what that means is that once we've seen symptoms happening, we would, for example, a hacking attempt or an intrusion are discovered, the incident management team could be involved. They could carry out the work that they need to do to prevent any kind of service interruption. And then the problem management team takes over and they document the symptoms so that if they're ever seen again in the future, the incident management team and the help desk know exactly what to do without having to re-research a second time. And what that enables us to do is to most quickly and easily resolve incidents and prevent incidents from happening.
Okay, so problem management builds wikis or knowledge databases or with the service desk to create. Okay, yeah, the green light's coming on. This is why the green light's coming on.
Yes.
It's not necessarily, okay, we've had a server go down 15 times in the month. Why is it happening? They're not the lessons learned people. They're not the ones that go, okay, why do we have this problem? We need to fix it.
Actually, Brian, they are, but I didn't include that in this presentation because I really wanted to concentrate more on information security rather than kind of problem management theory. But they actually do that. They are tasked with understanding why is it that this server falls over at exactly 9 o'clock every Tuesday morning? Why is it that this server's fallen over 15 times in the last month?
Okay.
You know, why? And putting in place remedial actions to prevent that happening in the future, because by doing so, they're once again enabling the highest levels of service availability by preventing those failures.
Okay, so some of your incident response team might be on the problem management team for, say, disaster recovery drills. After the disaster recovery drill, you'll run a lessons learned, and your problem management folks will get in and go, okay, we moved over to the beta site, but during the move to the beta site, we found that we didn't have enough pipeline for enough data to be transferred because the last time we did this, we didn't have XYZ system. So the problem is, we have this pipeline issue. We need to fix it for the future.
You're exactly right. And actually, this talks to a point that Brian, the other Brian, made a while ago, which was the possibility that an organization will need new roles through rolling out these ITIL best practices. Problem management is a very interesting one because it's almost split 50-50 in the organizations that I've worked in, where they make a decision either to have a full-time problem manager who's responsible for doing exactly what you've just talked about on a permanent basis, or whether problem management is really a role that somebody else, a technical person, undertakes for a certain defined subset of problems, your most business critical problems. So that that statement that you just made there, Brian, kind of draws the circle or completes the circle on a comment that Brian made earlier. So
well, would the problem management be more? You mentioned the more permanent gig as to a collateral type duty. Is that just based on maturity? The more mature an organization gets, or maybe even the size of the organization, would require a more permanent and dedicated problem manager?
The answer is yes, but also there's an element of maturity because once people really implement problem management and see the benefits that can be derived from driving repeat problems out of the environment, and those benefits being higher levels of service availability and a more robust IT environment, it really does pay for itself, but only once it becomes more mature. And once you're able to do trending analysis and truly understand where the repeat problems in the IT environment are so that you can permanently fix them.
So this is all about root cause, right? Root cause analysis.
Sure.
That's a big element of problem management, yes.
Yeah.
It is.
And so your problem manager is going to have to be able to interface on a technical role with the folks in the trenches, but also be able to speak to management on, why the problem is the way it is and a way around it. So a problem manager might find its way to like a CISO type role, where you've got the technical manager talking to the rank and file folks, but also having to interface with the C-level folks and say, okay, this is the problem, this is how we need to fix it. This is the widget or the box that goes bing that we need to be able to invest in to help us fix those issues. Or, this is the problem we need to, investigate and make these changes and integrate with change management to get these things done in a timely manner.
That's a very insightful comment, Brian, because to be a good problem manager, you really do have to, have a foot in both fields, the hard technical field and the business field. You need to be able to deep dive into the root cause of a problem and explain it in plain English language, but then come up with a technical solution and then drive that technical solution to implementation through change management. You're exactly right. That's all what problem management's all about.
Very nice.
Yeah. And actually, I think that brings us on to, change management, the next slide, number 38. So change management is responsible for minimizing the possibility of change activity adversely impacting the IT environment. We've talked about that quite a bit during this broadcast. And change management should also allow a greater ability to handle a large volume of changes, including those to permanently resolve the causes of problems and information security related incidents. So we've kind of tied that one off as well there.
Yeah.
Requirements validation and testing. We've talked about this multiple times as well. It's very important, not when you're defining the requirements for a solution, that you don't just document functional requirements, that you also consider capacity, availability, service level, post-implementation operational support requirements, and of course, information security requirements.
Yes, my wife has mentioned several times about functional requirements and SLAs. After she gets into the testing phase, she finds out that she told me about a job she used to work in contractor where, to do a process or to order something on a web page, it needed to be like no more than 10 seconds. And after they went through testing, it was like 15 to 17 seconds, and they were blowing the SLA out of the water. And they had to go all the way back to the beginning to either streamline a process or to make the whole process easier because the database lookup was what was taking so long.
Yeah, so it's always, you've got to bear in mind the three legs of the change management stool: adherence to best practices, protection of the IT environment, but also enabling the work of the business, of the organization. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then that brings us on to the final process that's involved in this space. And we've talked about this a little bit already: asset and configuration management. Responsible for maintaining a repository of not just asset information, but also configuration information. So these are the links between assets that enable the presentation of a service from source to desktop. Mm-hmm. So this process is responsible for improving the accuracy of configuration item status throughout its life cycle, to identify and remove unauthorized IT components. They can potentially represent a great threat to the IT environment, mm-hmm. and to provision a tool that provides virtual representation of the IT environment, something that's very useful to information security guys like yourselves, to help identify poorly performing assets, to reduce audits, facilitate restoration when we have a crisis or a disaster situation, and also to enable legal and regulatory compliance to be met.
So data flow diagrams, network diagrams, content configuration management systems like databases that would have, what software is running on which server, what package is running on which server.
Yeah. Now, the first two things that you said there, they could be referenced in your configuration management system, but are still more likely to be stored on a SharePoint site somewhere. The second set of things that you said, application to server mapping, things like that, absolutely critical in asset and configuration management. You need to know if I'm going to take this server down on Friday night at 9 o'clock, what services are going to be impacted as a result of that. And the only way to figure that out is you've got to know what's on the box. And that information is documented in your asset and configuration management system.
Now, what do you, you don't need a configuration management. How many times have you taken down a server and you're like, oh, yeah, that was also the email server. My bad. Yeah. Oops. Yeah. So yeah, that's very important. You got to know what's running on your box, making sure that and this is also good for capacity planning, because if you find out that you've got your email server and it's running, with a 20 gig hard drive and you've got 18 gigs worth of email on there, you need to know that eventually you're going to need to be doing some upgrades of your systems. And the ITIL folks will help thank you in capacity planning to, because you'll be planning that over time, and so it all kind of trickled down. Everything is kind of related in a lot of ways.
And I think the final slide there is just a conclusion that international standards for IT service management, ISO 20K, and for information security, 27001, are complementary, and ITIL can be used to most effectively implement ISO 27001 recommendations.
That's awesome.
Is that your opinion, or is that a fact? It can be used to most effectively implement.
Oh, that's my opinion, but if you wanted to leave that one out, I'm happy for you to do that, Brian.
No, it's cool. It's an audio now, so.
Yeah, please don't include anything where I ummed and hard. You asked a couple of really tricky questions there that I hadn't thought too much about before.
No, that's cool. Mr. Betcher, this was your idea. I have a takeaway that I've got. I want to hear your takeaway for this very informative podcast.
Oh, now you put me on the spot. I didn't even think of that.
Well, I think that this is one that is going to be one for the ages, because this was a very eye-opening podcast.
Yeah, my takeaway is that it might be worth the investment, or actually, I think it will likely be worth the investment to look at ITIL, to implement best practices in your organization. Kind of similar to the scenario that I said, where I open a ticket and I do more work than the guy who's supposed to actually do the work, trying to get him to look at my ticket, to act on my ticket, and to actually perform the ticket and get everything he needs to, make the thing that I requested. So it's very frustrating when these best practices aren't implemented, and in an organization that is mature in ITIL, it's streamlined and it just works, But the initial investment is harsh. But I think, like the example you said with what was the company in San Antonio, Tim?
USAA.
Yeah, you saved what, $30 million. I mean, I can definitely see that.
Just a final point about change management there, Brian. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah.
I can.
Okay. There are several things that you can do to mitigate that situation. Change management does involve a big upfront investment. What people need to understand, though, is that if you don't have a build plan and a test plan and an implementation plan, and the implementation goes wrong, you are screwed when you try and put the IT environment back to the pre-change status that it was in. Also, once you've created those things, you can very often leverage them time and time and time again, literally just by changing the implementation date and time, and you can pretty much use the same plans time and again. Also, there's a concept in ITIL of a standard change that doesn't have to go through the full rigor of the change management process. It's proved to be safe. It cannot cause a service interruption. It cannot cause any untold or unforeseen impact on the IT environment. We've done this hundreds of times before. It can be done any time of day or night. Those types of changes can be fast-tracked through the process, and they don't need the full rigor of change management. There's all sorts of things included in the ITIL framework that help mitigate that situation that you've talked about. And so because ITIL is now very mature, these things have been added to the framework as a way of supporting people and overcoming the situation that you outlined there.
Very cool. Yeah, my takeaway was when Mr. Betcher had suggested Mr. Wood to come on the podcast and talk about ITIL and integrating it with information security, I was like, ITIL, really? It didn't. I had some shell shock from the previous company I used to work at in San Diego, and I was not expecting the kind of discussion that we had here. And it's been really eye-opening. I think that this is definitely one of those podcasts that's going to go beyond just me being on the podcast. I'm going to try as much as possible to work towards getting these integrated into my own company. We're a little startup. We have a little bit of clout in the information security industry, and I think these could only help us in our processes to be better at those things. So it's been illuminating to have Mr. Tim Wood on tonight, and I appreciate Mr. Betcher for the insight that I've gained in this.
It's been my great pleasure. Thank you both very much for inviting me.
Yeah. So Tim, how could people get a hold of you if they wanted to get a hold of you? I mean, outside of, I guess you don't give a lot of talks at security conventions. So seriously though, you should definitely work on this. I mean, you've got 41 slides, so if you talk to, I don't know, 2-3 minutes on a top, I think you could do an hour-long talk at a convention or something. And there are many in the area. If you have lunch with Mr. Betcher again in the next few months, there are several. This is the season for the security cons. I could definitely see this at a convention. I mean, I've heard of worse talks at conventions, so this is a fantastic talk that should be definitely given.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So again, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to get a hold of you? Are you on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I mean, should I give out my email address? What's your
What?
preference?
Uh,
Now, people can find you on LinkedIn. It's Tim Wood and
yeah.
Austin or something like that.
It
Yeah, and
is, yeah.
they can send you messages through LinkedIn, or if they want to get a hold of you and send you a question, they can always email us at bds.podcast@gmail, and we'll forward it on to you. We'll be really good about that. Um, yeah, that's so. Yeah, if you want to continue the conversation, definitely on Twitter or on our Facebook page, use hashtag pound breaksec, or you can. Reach out to Mr. Betcher and myself. I'm at Brian Brake, and Mr. Betcher is at Betcher Pwned. And we have a Facebook page. We just went over 11,250 followers on Twitter. I mean, not on Twitter, but Facebook. It's fantastic. So you can get us at facebook.com/breaking down sec. And we're on iTunes. If you have enjoyed this podcast as much as I have, please leave us feedback on iTunes, because they like when we have feedback, and I like when we have feedback. So, Tim, if there's anything you want to talk about in the future, if you do anything else with ITIL, or are there any new future versions of ITIL coming out? Is there like a version 4 coming out soon?
I'm not aware of that, Brian, right now.
Okay.
I think there's plans to do a minor refresh, but I would really need to look into that and give you a definite answer.
Okay, I would love to have you come back on if they are planning on doing a refresh, and we can talk about some of the differences between V3 and the refresh. Or if you want to come on and talk about, I don't know, do you do anything with document controls, or documentation, anything like that? I mean,
not to date, Brian. No.
Okay. All right. Well, we are going to find a reason to have you back on again, because it really classes up the joint when we have somebody with an accent on. So we love having Lee Brotherston on, who's a fellow England from the United Kingdom, and it's always great to have people with the differing opinions on. So that was it for this week, and please leave us feedback, because this was a great podcast. So have a great week, everybody. From Breaking Down Security World Headquarters, this has been Brian and Brian. Have a great week. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.